Last week, we saw a demo from Gabor about Audit Trails, update on shortcodes, talked about this website, and talked about now. Today, status here. Let me refresh that. Not, oh, yes, this one, fix for CPF, when other scripts are also adding to sessionStorage. From Matteo, we merged it on Thursday. There was an issue with sessionStorage conflicts between two different things storing in the same sessionStorage keys. So JavaScript update to be sure that it's a key before accessing the value. It's an integer. On the next, OrchardCore. Last week, 28, that's this one, upgrade to the scene, perf improvements, fix typo sanitizer instead of sanitizer, document link tag helper, and improve resource documentation from Seth. Okay. The link tag helper. In a recipe, overwrite parent variable. In a recipe, overwrite parent variable. Issue with scopes in recipes.
Yeah, the big issue with that one was the executor was a singleton and it was storing its variables, some of the variable sections locally. So as you rerun recipes or ran inner recipes, they were overwriting those method providers.
I don't like this kind of scope management. Because it's just seeing the ambient shell scope. That's hard. It's not predictable. Okay, small typo from Sipke. Fixes themes versions rendering. Space. Okay, this is the change. info. Okay. How to see what's the change here? No, that's not that. Module info. Okay. Make test work across both ASP.NET Core HTTP servers. What's the difference here?
So when it was running under IIS, it would throw one particular exception one way, and under Kestrel it's a slightly different exception, so it just failed under Kestrel.
Yeah, that's that. Okay, that's the type of exception. Update package dependencies for HTML sanitizer, mail kit, message pack, MIME kit, mini profiler, mock, Serilog. Okay. Content definition stores guide. So we talked about it last time, and it was merged. Okay, thank you. User updated event. User updated event. I think the PR we merged on Thursday looks familiar.
It's similar to the deleted user.
That's right. Okay, so user event, new event updated, enabled, updated, and deleted issue. New contributor, npm dependencies. Why is that?
I reverted it. I made another PR. I branched from the wrong branch, so it was a mess.
Elliptic, run localization middleware earlier. So what was the issue with this one? It's an interesting one.
So Kevin has a PR in which it is merged in the next couple with some localized stuff for OpenIddict. But the localization middleware hadn't run by the time OpenIddict was running, so that's what I saw on the issue. So JT just runs it a bit earlier.
Fix bug in global method. Try. Catch. Global method. Oh, it's a log global method. Okay. Interesting. Implement a new localized display and description store APIs introduced. Okay, so the changes in the OpenIddict reflect it. And using the localizer. Why is the localizer necessary here? Oh, it's passing the call here. Okay. Okay, OpenIddict, React. Format fixes, content localization README. Okay. Validation part fix prefix. Validation part. Fix the prefix. That's weird. That's weird. It's weird that we have to do that trick for a part, even a validation part.
Yeah, the reason is because the for value there that's being rendered by the validation message is something that the user inputs on the part. So it's actually referring to another field, or it should be referring to another field that it's showing a validation message for. So when it renders in display, it would automatically put the field prefix on. But then it's validation part dot the field you're trying to validate. It is weird.
There will be other bugs because of that. Like when this part is used somewhere else, that will break something else. I'm just memorizing that. And then in 2 weeks, when another bug is fixed because of that, I remember. These kind of fixes, you know what I mean? They don't last long.
I do. We went back and forth on it. But I actually think the idea might be to not be using the HTML helper to do the validation display.
So buildTransitive may be case sensitive. What does it mean? So here's just a space, apparently. Oh, okay. Password configuration documentation. Password configuration documentation. What does it look like? How to change the password requirements. Blah, blah, C#. Okay. Are these the only parameters, or there are more, like number of times you can mess up? Or maybe it's not related to the value, to the
I didn't check. Maybe there are 1 or 2 more here.
So for instance, the number of times before you can lock the account or things.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's not password validation, but might be related and might be interesting to also. Or I assume also just a pointer to the SPN configuration. As long as you have an entry point to say, okay, it's identity option, you can do that. But really, you should look into the SPI configuration documentation to have all the information about that.
Yes.
And why is that this one? This one is weird. Why would you do that?
To read from the navsettings.json file.
Isn't it do it automatically? Already?
Sorry, what?
Isn't it reading this file even if you don't call this code?
No, the first sample is to do it manually.
So yeah, this is by code, but what I mean is that let's forget about the code.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say I want to change it by configuration, doing that in the file. I assume you don't need to write this code to be able to change this file, because this code is already handled by the program.cs, create default builder. This is the default configuration builder. in the default builder of the web, whatever, of the program TS. That's why I wonder that you can still do that already. I mean, you can already do that without having to write any code. I would think so. The same way you can already configure log levels and things like this, because the default web host builder is doing exactly the code you are typing. So I think it's just extra code that is not necessary.
In the sample, you specify from which root section name you configure the settings.
I still think it works. So if I take the default CMS app, you see the create default builder, configure web host default, whatever. So these calls, this guy, and that's why it takes args, because internally the create default builder will do that, and also read the args from the command line, so you can configure from the command line also, and that's why it's passing the args here. So you could even define these settings not just from the app.json, but from the command line also, like -- identity option _ password _ required digit false, something like that. So yeah, interesting. I like to see that. If it's, yeah. I think it should be.
I think the binding wouldn't happen automatically, but the configuration binding you're showing there won't happen automatically. But you should be able to inject configuration in your startup rather than having to build the configuration builder there.
Maybe it's not directly identity option, but this is definitely something. And at the end, identity option that is already working. So to be investigated. Okay, cool. Thank you. Well, at least following that will work. At least. But I'm sure there is another way, simpler way to make it work. Aren't you missing a tick here? Back tick? Oh no, oh, that's me, sorry. It was not. Okay, good. Questions, comments on the question, on the status? Ah, who's there? Okay. Oh, I didn't ask demos.
So if we have some time, I have a very work in progress demo that we could run through, but only if nobody's got anything else.
We have lots of time. Any other demo? We have our new Audit Trail demo.
Not yet, maybe later.
And I have the notepad, so we'll have time to look at my notes from last week, comments about the Audit Trail, because we might have time. Okay, so then I didn't hear you. That's okay. Dean, you can.
Be great.
Good. You can do your demo, Dean.
Okay, let me share my screen then. So let me know when you can see the screen there.
Yeah.
Excellent. So let me run through the issues first, because there's a couple of issues here. We've talked a little bit about how to move secrets. In this example, your SMTP password between production servers and staging servers, or from development through to production, or just via recipes. And a while ago, I introduced a PR with the idea of some parameters where you would be able to encrypt them. We'll find later on down here, a little tweak here. And we talked about it a little bit further and decided that it would be better if we had some kind of way of encrypting them. And I've been doing a little bit of research and looking at what other CMSs do, and have come up with a slightly different solution to what we've originally talked about. and it kind of falls a little bit into this issue here, which is an issue from Zoltan, to make it a little bit easier to configure your email password, which is normally done in the UI, and a lot of other passwords are done in the UI from your app settings file instead. And the problem we have at the moment there, because there's a couple of people who have tried to do a couple of PRs on it, is that we don't really have any way of demonstrating that in the UI that the setting is, or the password has come from somewhere else. So to kind of try and combine the two issues, well, as I've thought about things and as I've gone through some of the encryption options that are available, it became a little clear to me that it might actually be better if we had the concept of secrets which were actually available in the UI, in the admin, that could come from different providers, which would be able to provide or store the secret and then retrieve it by the module when it needs it, and then move it to other servers when necessary. So I did a little bit of research on what some of the other CMSs do in this kind of area, and Drupal have quite a good kind of story to tell there.
A question.
So, yes.
How close is it from what we talked about? Because every time you're showing a page, I'm like, is it new or is it what we talked about?
It's a little. It's newer. It's
because
newer than what we talked about.
You mentioned CMSs, and I don't remember we talked about what the others do. But it's all
no. I've done quite a bit of thinking since we last had an opportunity to talk about it, and done some research on. And some CMSs handle it, some CMSs don't. Drupal had, I felt, quite a nice story. So the reason we've kind of been talking about it quite a bit is because we didn't want to introduce something here into the whole recipes scenario which doesn't meet all requirements and isn't secure. So the idea, rather than having a special section for your password secret in the recipe or anything like that, is actually to have, and what I felt as I worked through it, is that we're actually haven't been doing the right thing with things like the email password. At the moment, they're stored on the iSite property, and each module decrypts and encrypts its own secret there. But I've came to the conclusion it would be a lot better if you had somewhere where they were stored where they were a secret, where you could get them from multiple sources or store them in multiple sources. For example, the database with data protection encryption, or in, as a read-only accessor through UI configuration, or directly with Azure Key Vault, where you can read and write secrets, but they don't kind of, they are managed by Key Vault itself. And the idea is to fix kind of this issue plus a few other issues. One of them, for example, if we were to go to make a workflow, we would, if we're making an HTTP workflow, we would generate a key for the endpoint for this workflow. But that key so we generate this key here with a token. This token key here is also unique to this machine. I can't run it on another tenant. If I export this workflow or use a deployment to say this is a recipe, then this key is no use. I have to regenerate it when it gets to the other side. So that means if I've taken this and used it in a form, this form, if I've taken it and used it here, then I also have to update this piece of content with the new key as soon as it leaves my machine, essentially. So the idea was that I had, and it is very work in progress, so it's good to get some feedback on it now before I do too much work on it, is to actually have somewhere where we can store bindings, like, for example, this workflow key. And you'll see there's nothing here other than the idea of where it would be provided. So that when we then go to the form and make the form, we can say in a new field that I just very quickly put in here, and the idea is that when the driver runs, it will look into the secret service, find the key for it, get the right value, get the correct value, and pass it to the form, which kind of creates like a... Sorry?
Because of liquid or because just this field?
So I've just put this in very short term. It very much could be something that that we fetch through liquid.
So this way you don't have to handle secrets everywhere. Just say, no, I handle liquid, and if you want a secret in liquid, fine.
Yeah, exactly. I just put this in for the demo because right now it does absolutely nothing. But the kind of better thought that I was having was that we should be able to just get the key out of liquid. It would be something like this, maybe. And then the same thing would kind of happen in your SMTP settings. Here, again, I've just put another field in here, but realistically, so this one's a little more complicated because there's a bit of migration that would potentially happen. So it may be easier to have a different field for it rather than the password field, but the concept is the same. Of course, because I put it because I cut and pasted that input. So the idea is that, and in this area, as you click Add Secret, you'll get a modal pop up with the type of secrets that you can create. Workflows are special because they need to be generated with a value in the token. So that would be a workflow kind of secret. Email is quite straightforward. That would be kind of an authentication secret. This one I just put in as somewhere where we might potentially store a security key that you could then use to export these secrets with. And at the moment, I'm kind of imagining that there might be 3 different providers. Your standard database provider, a configuration provider, which just means that you say where it should look to find the secret. Or the other one would probably be Key Vault, because we can very easily write a module that writes directly, can read and write from Key Vault, or a provider for that. So that means that we don't have to worry about how we export these secrets in a recipe, because we don't. We just export the key. And the expectation is that you would either create on the other server that you want your email password with the correct value, which may very well be a different password between production and your test environment, so that when the recipe runs, it will just look up and find the correct binding. So that's the idea.
Or you can have an export step to export your secrets.
Exactly. And they would potentially be exported with a encryption key here, and then, for example, when you created the encryption key here, it would show you the value of it once, and then you'll never see it again. So you copy that value and you put it on your other machine as well at the time of creation. And then both machines are able to communicate with each other. So that's the idea. It is very work in progress at the moment, but yeah, any feedback welcome.
So what are the differences since we last talked about it?
So
because I remember we mentioned some stores like, yes, database, configuration, key vault, that you can create secrets and define in what store. They are named secrets, and then you can, from the recipes, call some function to encrypt, decrypt, or because there will be a service for that, and also settings for this, encrypt, decrypt. But here you could also say, I want to read and write a secret.
So the idea here is from what we talked about last time, was that we would no longer have that section.
Sure.
We would just have a section here which says password key, and then that would say
password key, not password.
Well, it might say
because
it might say password, but we have
either use the password and then have a function to get the password from the key. Otherwise, you have to handle anything as the password, as a key.
Yeah. So that is the problem. It would be a bit of migration to say to everybody, oh, you can't use a password anymore directly, you have to use a key. And it's hard to detect that. Well, actually, it's not too hard to detect. It is something that we could probably handle automatically. So the idea is to really not have a secret section at all in recipes, and just to start using a key lookup, and kind of abstract the issue a little bit elsewhere.
So you could still do it. You could say here, get key or get secret, and then call it SMTP settings key, and it will look inside the secret store it will look for the store of this key to get the actual password during import in this case. You see, get secret, fine, boom. And then, so that will still work with your system.
So that would still, yeah.
Okay, and when we export, you could say that when you render the password section step here, you could generate that, and also a step to export the key, the password itself as a separate step, or not. Just say no. Take the same key in the distant server. It's up to you to add a step to also export the secrets during your recipe.
Correct. You either export the secrets during your recipe, or if you're in a kind of running production environment where you already have all those values set up on both servers, you don't need to worry about it.
Yes. So yeah, that works. So yeah, I prefer this thing here, and you see and get secret. Yeah, and there will be more than get secret. There will be also encrypt, decrypt, and then where you can pass a key to use for the encryption key. I mean the key of the encryption key. You see what I mean? Like
yeah, the key of the encryption key.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you don't pass the. Yeah.
You also have encrypt.
Yeah, or maybe actually it's actually the actual key, but you can do get secret, encrypt of get secret of my encryption. I don't know, but yeah. So there will be different methods to that, or maybe we said we will use a custom encryption service. That would be different.
So the idea was that if you have stored an AES key in here, then we would probably have an encryption service that was able to read and use that key.
The settings for the encryption service will be able to point to a key here.
Yeah. So the idea was, as I kind of thought through it, I just felt like we were probably making something that was only used in one place, where actually there's a lot of places that it needs to be, or that it could be used. So I call them bindings.
Yeah, I would just call it secrets. For me, it's just a secret.
It will be, yeah. In code, it's bindings, but for here, it will be it will just be secrets. The idea being that this will be a drop-down list of providers. Yep. So you specify which provider you're in, and if you want to move something from one provider to the other, providing it's a read-write provider, then it will just copy it from the database into Key Vault for you.
Yeah, so yeah, I would call them stores. Like you have secrets and stores for secrets, so secret store and yeah, that makes sense. Okay, good. So name, description, provider / store, which is configured and provided by different modules. So you will have a database secret store, a Key Vault secret store, a configuration secret store, which is read-only, or some other file-based secret store, or whatever your solutions provide. It could be also environment secret store.
Environment will come straight from configuration or binding configuration. Yeah. So I've actually, the system's designed to work very much like, or to feel very much like configuration. You know, this is the equivalent of an app settings file or environment variables. And then in the other places, you just perform lookups on them. So we're just bringing it through.
That's why you call them bindings now, because actually what you are seeing is that you want to expose something which comes from the store, but it might be in the store and you didn't expose it. That's why you call it binding.
That's why I call it a binding. In the same way that you put something in app settings, but you still have to call configure somewhere to configure your options class. So something that's in the right section in your app settings or in Key Vault isn't going to automatically appear here. You have to, point to it, say that it exists, and give it a name.
Then a feature like workflow could have a setting where you will define what store to use to store the keys, for instance, and it could automatically generate secrets in the default store configured for workflows, so that it could generate a new secret every time inside.
Where's my properties button? Yeah, the idea is for workflows, we'll have another button here, which is generate and store, and that will just provide a pop-up, a modal, which will or take you through to a screen where you'll type in the key name for it and choose which store you want it to go into, or it could be done by settings. So it seemed like a good way to provide a linking between, a loose linking between this and the forms that will actually consume these a lot of the time.
Okay. Let's start with the email password. It's easier.
Yeah, we start with one.
Database plus email password just as a proof of concept, and then validate the full path. Also, we mentioned some new parameter in the import export. What was it? Was it the no? Like when you say let's export a recipe, then we could pass. What did we say we could pass? No, not secrets.
So we did think we could pass an encryption key there as well.
Oh yes, so we could so we could define a public-private key somewhere, and then in the settings, and then for the at least the import export, so you could configure, yeah, but that might be, yeah.
We talked about it, and as I worked through it, I realized that we needed a place to store those.
Yeah, so that's the same story, I understand. So here you will store the public key as a secret here. And then in the call of the recipe, the get secret or the decrypt encrypt will use this key. So that will work, I see. That makes sense. So on the server side, you create a private key. You have a tool that lets you create a private public key there. Then on the server side, you store the private key as a secret in this screen. On the client side, you store the public key as a secret here. Then when we generate the recipe, we use the public key, okay, to encrypt everything. And we can even store the password encrypted in the recipe. And then, or using the method called that is password key, we know. And then on the server side, when it's reading, it has to read decrypt the payload using the private key. So that's still doable using your technique, but this is something to also test with the email password to be able to use this public-private key. Yeah. Unless you just do private, whatever, but
it'll probably have to be private because private public is limited to 4096 bytes. So normally it's used as a signing.
The key itself.
Yeah, the amount it can encrypt.
Actually.
Yeah, so normally what happens is you will sign the document with the private key or the public key, but actually encrypt it with a symmetric key, which is this one here, the AES.
Might be right, but I don't believe you at all. This limitation.
I went into quite a lot of it with Kevin, and
okay,
yeah, we're not quite there yet, but we needed to get to a point. I felt we needed to get to a point where we actually have a place to store them first, and then we can work through from there. But once we got to the point where we can actually use an email password as a key, we don't need to pass the password around anymore.
If you do that, yes, because you have stored the password also on the server side. But if you want to transfer the password itself,
and then we'll have to do the encryption bit.
Yeah, and that might be two different export steps for email. Like, related to the configuration port that Zoltan created, the issue. We said, okay, let's do the automatic export for the things that are not encrypted first, and we did that. Now, what we need is new steps for the email password, and we might have different steps. One that will just export the key, like the email password string, and one that will actually export the password encrypted, as long as you have the private key on the server also, on the other side. Yeah. So there might be different steps depending on how you want to export something, even if it's the same thing.
Exactly, and that can work well.
That would be right. A great example.
Cool. Well, thank you all for listening to that one.
Thank you for not forgetting about it. I forgot about it.
Yeah, no, it's slowly on the back burner. But I think this will be useful. I think we can. I'll proof of concept at first, and then we'll see how we go.
And you mentioned Drupal. What does Drupal do?
So Drupal have a module called the key module, which does not too far off what I've described, where they have a development configuration key provider, which is a file environment, or they use something like Key Vault on the other platform. And then the other modules, including their encryption module, can look into this key store to get keys, and same with things like their SMTP service. Some of the issues, or some of the stuff with the Drupal one is, I think this configuration one, the development one, is not encrypted, so it's just plain text. But I think we would probably always store it encrypted.
At the same time, that's the case already today with the site settings where you put a key inside, it's just plain text, it's not encrypted. The idea being that if you have access to the file system, well, you have all the power to get the connection string, to get everything, or to run a command to get environment variable. So that's the idea. But some people don't want that, so they want to encrypt and to store their secrets somewhere else. So that's a valid solution for some people, to just have the key in a configuration file. Again, look at the connection string that is usually in the configuration in the app settings JSON and encrypted. That's how you do that. So.
Yeah, and one of the providers for this one potentially could even be the tenant's app setting.json file.
Or it could be the value. Store, no, local. Yeah, because when you store in database, you still need a key if you want to encrypt it, or you don't encrypt it. So
yeah, I think when we store in the database, we put it in through data protection. Then it's bound to the site, which seems reasonable.
Yeah, and in the multi-node environment, you need the same data protection. That's okay. The same keys across your node, which makes sense.
Yeah, or you put it in Key Vault and you make your nodes talk to the same Key Vault server.
That's okay. That's extensible. People put the level of security they want. That's good. Okay. I think we'll still need a simple service in a module to be able to encrypt, decrypt, and with the settings that will point to your key store to define what is a key for encryption, decryption. But as a developer, you can encrypt, decrypt easily using just a service. You don't have to say anything, just encrypt, decrypt, and then the settings will let you define what is a key.
Yeah, I agree. We do need that, and that's reasonably easy once we have a key store.
That should be part of the module, actually. The key management module could provide the encrypt, decrypt methods.
Yeah, that's probably the easy bit. The difficult bit's always storing the keys and transferring them around.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you. So what did I say? We'll talk about that. Feedback from Audit Trail. We have 5 minutes. I will go over the points. If you remember the demo from last week about Audit Trail, let's see quickly what I said, what I had to say. So hide IP. Yeah, so I remember that we can store the IP address for each operation. And you could, there was in the table of the Audit Trails event, a column with the IP. What I will do is hide the IP by default and only show the IP when you go in the details. Yes. So the idea is that having the IP in the table itself, I don't see why it's important. You just look at the IP if you want to look at the IP. So you go in the details and you see the IP for the operation. But I don't think you need to display the IP for every event automatically, well, by default. And I said even more since there is no filter. So in the top toolbar, there was no filter for the IP. So I don't see why put it in the table. It's too much space, in my opinion. But we'll go.
I'm gonna share my screen to see the table. And this is the column of the client IP, and
Yes.
these are the default built-in filters. But of
Okay,
course,
thank you.
you have the option to add additional filters. So if the user or somebody would like to create a filter to filter by the client IP or something, it is possible, of course.
Okay.
But
I have another comment for the table configuration. You will see, and it will also solve that. So that's just my opinion. Then people can chime in and say if they think the IP should be visible here or not. Even more that maybe you don't want to see the IP for security reasons. Like, you might want to be able to track it, but you might not want people to be able to see it based on who. I don't know. No, it's personal information, and that's sensitive. So then you can keep sharing, and I will read my notes, but you have them also. Yes, so timestamp should display time ago. Just personal opinion. Instead of displaying the full date, you can just say like, so we have this helper method that says for the content items like 1 day ago, 2 minutes ago, a week ago, and then when you hover it, the tooltip could be the full date. Just a suggestion. Doesn't have to be there. It's just my personal opinion. I like the 1 day ago instead of Wednesday, July 29th. But I don't know. Days. What? No, you don't take notes now. You don't. You'll watch the video later. I don't have time for that. Details. What happens if image doesn't exist anymore or file is different?
What do you mean?
What did I mean? Details. I think when you go to the details, you were showing a file name. In the example, there was a file name. And I was no, a blog post. You can post a file for the background. So the idea is that what happens if you change the background? You don't track it, right? There was an issue, I think, that there might have been some concern with the way files are stored and how you display it in the diff. So you can't display that. So I think the field will not reflect that there was a change in this image. So if you change it, you don't know that it has been changed, and you don't know. And first, you can't know the old values because, well, we don't store versions for the files. The only thing you could do is just store a hash to know the file has changed. I don't know if there is a way to do that.
There is no table. Yes, the fact that I changed the image isn't shown.
So that was just a question. What happens if the image doesn't exist anymore, or if the file is different? There is no way to track the changes or to know that the file has changed or who has changed the image. That's just a thing, a question I will have. Like tomorrow, someone changes and makes a joke and changes the image. You have 10 versions of the content item, but you have no idea to know what version, what change updated the file. So that would be interesting to maybe store the hash of the file when they change or every time, just to track who changed the file. That's just an idea. Summary. What is summary? I say summary is written. Oh yes, in the.
Do you mean this one?
Summary, I said, is redundant with other columns. So the idea is that I think it's a lot of text which doesn't add any value. So if I look at the text inside, version 2 of the blog post was published. Well, I have the event published. I have a link to, at least there could be a display text somewhere in a column, but the full text here, I think, doesn't add any value. And it must be hard to manage what is displayed here with templates or whatever. So I don't know what's the point of that, or maybe just in the details, but in the table here, I don't see the value. It should be a small list of data here where there's a table, not to have to, just opinion. Then next step, weird to see diff and before after on the same table. We prefer to see before after with highlighted differences. Oh, I think I know. When you go to details here, yes, you have the checkbox where you can display the before after and the diff at the same time. I'm not sure it's necessarily interesting to have the 3 columns at the same time. Either you want to see the diff or you want to see the before after. So you can still do that, but instead of UI, that's way to show the 3 of them. Imagine GitHub. You can see the 2 panes diff or the merge diff. It doesn't show you, oh, let's see the 2 panes diff plus the merge diff on the 3rd column. I mean, choose what you want to see, and otherwise that's crippling the page. That's weird. And another related comment was that when you are in the before after, can you open the before after? Remove the diff. Imagine there is no diff here. What would be interesting would be to highlight where the changes are on both sides, like GitHub does, because you know where they are because you have the full diff. If you do show diffs, you know what are the sections. So maybe in this view, the before after, just have a highlight in green or red or yellow, whatever, just the parts that change between the 2 things.
But the diff is about to highlight the changes. The new value is the green one and the red is the old one.
Yeah, exactly. So here you see you have the red, the. So in the before column, the should be highlighted. And on the after column, this is the should be highlighted.
Oh.
You see with a background or a different, this way you see what has changed also in this case. And that's exactly the GitHub diff, the 2 modes, either merged, which you have in your diff column, or split, which you have with before after. And you will, in both modes, you will see the differences. So that's what I'm missing in the before after view, to highlight the differences.
Yes, because if you would like to see the highlights, you can see the diff column. You can see the changes.
Yeah, but so take the very bright engineers at GitHub. They have 2 views, which you have here, which is called the split and the merge view. For the diff, the merge view is your diff column, and they do exactly what you did, red and green, and you can see the changes. And in the merge view, they have exactly what you did, the before after. But also in this view, they highlight the changes. And they don't tell you, hey, if you want to highlight the changes, go to the diff view. No, they want to see the split view with highlighted changes. So if you think it's unnecessary, then don't do that. But I think it will be nice in the before after columns also to have the colors, because you have the information. It's just so. So restore action should be a button on the right for consistency. I think we already mentioned that.
Yes. Only
yes, but it will also relate it to my next comment later. You will see. Why restore only on published events? Why not on saved events? Let's say I do multiple drafts over time. I don't publish them. Can I just restore an old draft, even if it was not published?
Yes, it's possible, of course. Yes, I can add that. Yes.
So I didn't see any filter by event type, like I want to see all the published events only. That would be something by default I will use, maybe. I had a comment about what is the spinning button in the comment of Audit Trail part, but I saw the same spinning button on, I think, William Best video. So I assume it's a plugin you have in your browser. I don't know what it is.
Yes, it's an extension. Yes.
Main comment. It feels weird to use a table instead of a list like summaries in the content items. So here you are using a table. I don't know if there is any other place in Orchard but the media where we use a table like this. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying it feels different than Orchard. And I could see something like this to show everything. Like you see the text of the content item, the event, and then the date, and then the actions on the right. So, and if you do that, so you showed us how you can configure a table by code. But if you did a view like the content items list with summaries view with a custom display type, which is called Audit Trail, then anyone could just use shapes to inject anything in this view, like the IP, if they want, just by changing a template on the admin themes. Or reordering the things they want by changing the template, or creating a custom row just for a specific type of event or for a specific content type. So that would be maybe more interesting in terms of UI and in terms of extensibility to use shape templates. And more consistent with the other views where we display lists like this. Just it's not easy, but it might be actually easier than what you did with the tables and the extensibility of the table itself, because you have to do some custom APIs for that.
Yes, but to add more and more columns to this list could be like a little bit weird, I think. So in this case, we have only the display text, the content type, a little batch here, and the actions. So if I would like to recreate something like this one, in that case, I think somewhere I have to write the name of the event, the user, timestamp, etc., etc. So in that case, how can I show these data here? Because
so, you see the last modified 5 days ago by admin?
yeah.
Here you have the time column and you have the author columns, and it's explicit, like you have the date and you have the user. So this is it. Then the content type is there. The published tag here, the published badge, could be the saved, deleted, published event. Exactly the same thing. The my new article title, you have it in the summary, and that will fit also here. Then the actions you have on the left, the details restore, will be buttons on the right. Details restore, and other actions, whatever they are. So everything you have in the table right now is exactly displayed in this summaries view. There is nothing more you have in the table here that is not already in the summaries view. Show me. See? What else? If I have some font, everything is there. There is nothing more. And yet it's more succinct. And the idea is that because it's a shape and shape templates from the admin thing, people will be able to add more, to move it around, or to customize it based on each event, based on each type, whatever they want. And it will be consistent. That are my points.
Yes.
Just feedback. Ignore content. That retention period, smaller text box, but just in the settings you have used the full width. You can use a smaller text box. It's nitpicking. Who cares? Minimum run interval, not necessary to configure. 1 day should be fine. Yeah, why do you configure the minimum run interval? Yeah, that's weird, because the retention period is in days. So just run that every day. Why would you have a retention period of 1 day and say, but merge it, prune it every 12 days? What's the point? Because if you prune every 12 days, well, you have 12 days and then you have 0, and then you have 12 days and then you have 0. That's weird. So I would just say retention period done, and then your background task just runs every day. You don't configure it because your retention period is in days, so you don't expect it to have less than a day or more than a day at least. So that's where to have 2 values. If your retention period is in minutes, you run every minute. If your retention period is in years, okay, run every day and it will remove a year. It will remove a day every day, and you will have maximum of a year. But yeah, I don't think you need to run to configure the minimum run interval. It's complex to understand what it does than compared to the retention period. Just the retention period is fine, I think.
Yeah, correct.
The diff on date time, I'm sure you can find better because it's totally unusable. I mean, it's weird to show like You see 946 in red, 46. It's weird. Maybe just show the old one dash the new one. I don't know if there is a way to handle that differently than the other things, because you have a generic algorithm, I assume here. But that would be nice to just say this is the full thing that has been changed. Not treat every char in this case, but the full string.
Yeah, because of readability.
So just that. Yeah, you have a sort order on the event name. I have no idea why you will sort on the event name. You filter on the event name, but you don't sort on the event name. And in the end, I just think that you want to filter on date time, up and down, and that's it. To sort by, sorry. Then you can filter on anything, but sort by, it should just be on date or the title if you want to look for something, the title or the date, but the event name, that's weird. And the category, same thing. I mean, date and title will be sufficient. Unnecessary, which means you are missing title, but you don't have the. Yeah, you have the date, but you don't have the title. Okay. I mentioned then that we need to be able to export Audit Trail, but I think we talked about it. And I have a question. How do you store the events in the database?
Yes. You can see the document table.
It's a document table, I see.
Yes. And in the document table, you can see some basic data related to.
My question was just, is it the document in the document table, or is it a custom table with custom columns, not a document? So I see it's a document here.
No, yeah, it's a document in a document table where you can see some basic data of every Audit Trail event, the category, the full event name, etc., etc. And here you can see that this is a content event, and after the content event, you can see that this is about publishing something, and here comes the full representation of the content item. So in this case, this is the current snapshot of this article. Because if we would like to restore, for example, from a point, or if we would like to compare it with a previous version, I have to, save this data here also.
So question, we store the versions individually in the database as documents already. So why do you need to clone the document if it's already somewhere in database? Well, sorry, I didn't ask a question because for Audit Trail reasons, someone might delete a version and you want to record that what was deleted. So you can't rely on that. So that's okay to copy the document completely. Thank you. Yeah, okay.
I know it's redundant, but I think there is no other way to do that.
My only concern is that the document table is used to store also the Audit Trail. Maybe it should have been a different document tables, but you would need to use a collection. And I think that so that's a new feature of SQL. Maybe that's something to look into.
I only have some index tables to filter.
Well, you have an index, but what I'm saying is that you have an index, fine, but also separate physically the content items from the Audit Trail. Just that if it grows a lot, it won't impact your performance on the content items. Because if you want to get to store all the Audit Trails forever, then then it might impact your perf on the document table. So that's interesting to have a different table for that, a different document table.
Create another table called Audit Trail or something.
It's a collection. As a collection in SQL. That's the same code you have to write. You just need to declare. I can show you later how to do that. Okay, thank you. That's all I had in mind for.
Thank you for your feedback.
Good. Okay, all done. Questions, comments? that and Bean secrets. Good. Good meeting. All done then. Thanks everyone. See you on Thursday. Bye bye.